There is a deception, a subtle, slow, silent deception that creeps in, not loud, not violent, but still deadly. It's when we mistake comfort for progress, familiarity for faith, routine for relationship. It's called spiritual stagnation. And it is dangerous because stagnation doesn't announce itself. It feels safe, predictable, familiar. But family, the Spirit of the Lord is not stagnant. He is always moving. He is always speaking. He is always drawing you deeper. So when you stop moving, when you stop growing, you begin to die in places no one sees. How conviction builds. Some of us have been camped at the last word God gave us, but you haven't moved since. You're still rehearsing a revelation from 5 years ago, but the Spirit has shifted. He's trying to pour fresh oil, but your vessel is still carrying stale wine. You are living off of yesterday's manna, but heaven has more. You've settled in the wilderness, but He called you to Canaan. Spiritual stagnation is one of the most deceptive conditions a believer can fall into because it often wears the disguise of comfort. It doesn't come with alarms. It doesn't shout. It quietly settles in the soul like dust on an unused Bible. The danger lies in its subtlety. We begin to confuse being settled with being safe, and over time the difference becomes blurry. When your soul is no longer yearning, when your spirit no longer burns with hunger for God, you don't immediately feel like something is wrong. You feel okay. Life may even look fine externally. You may be surrounded by familiarity, same church, same prayers, same habits, and yet deep within, there's no movement, no stretching, no divine disruption. The problem is that the Spirit of God is always moving. He's never stagnant. And if we are not moving with Him, then somewhere along the way, we've stopped following Him and started following our own patterns. Comfort is not always a blessing. Sometimes it's a spiritual trap. When we become too comfortable, we resist the very changes that are designed to bring us closer to God. We stop praying with urgency. We stop expecting God to show up. We stop stretching our faith, and instead, we settle for routine. But faith cannot live in comfort. Faith demands risk. It demands trust, and trust doesn't grow in predictable environments. What happens is we begin to live off of old revelations, things God said to us in a previous season, and we call that relationship. But God doesn't want you surviving on what He said 5 years ago. He's speaking now. He's moving now. And stagnation cuts you off from that present voice. That's why it's dangerous. It isolates you from divine timing and disconnects you from the rhythm of heaven. One of the most dangerous lies we believe in seasons of stagnation is, I'm okay because nothing is wrong. But what if the enemy's strategy isn't to destroy you, but to dull you? What if he knows that if he can't make you fall, he can still make you stop? Not publicly, but in the secret places, in your desire, in your hunger, in your expectation. When the enemy sees a believer who is no longer seeking, no longer growing, no longer desperate for God's presence, he knows he doesn't need to fight them anymore. They've already surrendered, passively. And that's the silent danger. You stop warring, you stop pressing, you stop reaching, you stop. And slowly death enters, not physical death, but the death of passion, purpose, power, and heaven is grieved because while you still breathe, your spirit no longer burns. But God is calling you out of that place. He's awakening the dry bones. He's disrupting your peace to call you into power because where His Spirit is, there's always motion. There's always glory to glory. And He never called you to comfort. He called you to transformation. There are moments in life when everything around you seems functional, yet something deep within feels unsettled. You can't quite explain it. There's no obvious crisis. You're not in rebellion. You still love God, but something feels off. That feeling isn't random. It's not just fatigue or confusion. It's what we call holy discontent, a divine restlessness that begins to stir when your current position no longer matches your spiritual potential. It is God's way of awakening your spirit to the fact that you've outgrown where you are. You've reached the limit of what this current level can offer you, and heaven is calling you higher. Discontent is often misinterpreted. Some people think they're just bored, discouraged, or tired. Others think maybe they're being ungrateful for what they have. But not all discontent is rooted in ingratitude. Some of it is a sacred sign that you were not created to stay where you are. That the comfort zone you built for survival has now become a prison. That the rhythms you once relied on for stability have now become a cage limiting your growth. When you begin to sense this holy unease, it's not the time to retreat or ignore it. It's a divine invitation to shift. The presence of holy discontent is usually the beginning of movement. Before God transitions you physically, He stirs you internally. He creates a spiritual discomfort that disrupts your normal. It's His way of making sure you don't settle for less than the fullness of what He's called you to. And if you're sensitive, you'll notice that this stirring often comes before clarity. God doesn't always give you the full picture. He gives you a prompting, a nudge, a sense that there's more. It is in that moment you're faced with a choice. Will you stay in the comfort of the familiar, or will you step into the unknown with God? The danger of ignoring holy discontent is that what starts as spiritual unease can turn into spiritual dullness if not acted on. You begin to normalize dryness. You start to justify stagnation, and over time your hunger fades, not because you weren't called to more, but because you silenced the voice that was calling you. That restlessness you feel isn't the absence of God. It's actually proof of His presence. He's stirring you. He's stretching you. He's reminding you that you're made for more than what you've settled for. Some of the greatest seasons of growth begin with divine frustration. Don't despise it. Don't suppress it. Lean into it. Ask God, what are you doing in me? What are you trying to shift? Because that feeling you can't shake is often the Holy Spirit preparing you for elevation. It's not a sign of something going wrong. It's a sign of something being birthed. And if you'll trust the restlessness, if you'll follow that prompting, you'll step into places you never imagined. Holy discontent is not your enemy. It's your signal that transformation is near. Revival doesn't come through passivity. It doesn't happen by chance or fall on those who are simply waiting in comfort. Revival is drawn to motion. It is attracted to the sound of obedience. When God calls you to move, it's not just for your benefit. It's for the release of something greater. He doesn't just want to stir you. He wants to revive everything connected to you. But revival demands participation. It requires a response, and that response often begins with one small but radical decision to obey. Obedience may seem simple, but in the spiritual realm, it is powerful. It's not about emotions or logic. It's about trust. Trusting that when God says move, He knows what's ahead. Trusting that what feels like risk is actually divine protection and preparation. Many believers are praying for revival, but few are willing to move when God interrupts their plans. They want the fire, but not the flame that burns away comfort. They want the glory, but not the process that makes them ready to carry it. Revival happens when obedience becomes more important than convenience. When we stop calculating the cost and simply say yes to the next instruction. Often that instruction won't make sense. It won't be easy, but it will be necessary. God rarely calls you to move when everything is settled. He often calls you when it's inconvenient, when it challenges your faith, when it stretches your capacity. Because revival isn't birthed in ease. It's birthed in surrender. There is always a move that precedes the breakthrough. There's always a step that leads to the shift. When God asked Abraham to leave his father's house, there was no blueprint, just a promise. When Peter stepped out of the boat, there was no assurance except the voice of Jesus. Revival is never convenient. It disrupts routines, challenges comfort, and demands movement. But when you move, when you respond to the voice of God, you unlock doors in the spirit that have been waiting on your obedience. We often think revival starts in a church building, but it really starts in the heart of one believer who says, I will not stay where I am. One person who chooses to pray again, fast again, seek again, move again. That kind of hunger is contagious. That kind of fire spreads. Your obedience can be the spark for someone else's deliverance. Your movement can trigger a chain reaction of breakthrough. If you are waiting for everything to feel right before you obey, you will miss the moment. Revival doesn't wait for your feelings. It waits for your surrender. There is something on the other side of your yes that you haven't even imagined. But you will never see it if you remain stuck. God is calling you higher, deeper, forward, not later, now, move again. Because revival is not a feeling, it's a result. And that result always starts with obedience.